to my very first Haunt Chat, which is something that I've noticed on some of the other YouTube pages. They do these little sort of discussion type shows, which is a good way of having regular content. So I thought it's something I'd have a go at, and I'm hoping maybe in the future that I can involve others in it. But also I'm sort of happy to rabbit along on my own, which you might have noticed I do like to rabbit. But for this first one, I thought what I do is I would sort of tell you all a little bit about me and why I'm doing this or trying to do this, and how I got to where I am in regards to collecting and everything else. So yeah, so I thought that in the future, what I'd like to do, or what I hope to do, is maybe preview when I'm coming up to doing one of these. And I have got a Facebook page which is exactly the same name, Haunt of the Collector, so please pop over there and click a like on that. So what I can do is I could preview one of these when they're coming up, and then if there's any topics or questions or things you'd like discussed, you could comment on there and I can bring them up, or comment on this video for things to do on the next one, and I can do it that way, you see. So I'd really like input from you guys as well. And yeah, and that would give more content. I'll also go over in the future, future releases, stuff that I've got maybe coming, other things that have come out, and discuss things like that. But for this first one, what I wanted to do was, I suppose, just give you a brief discussion about me, for those of you who don't know anything about me, and yeah, sort of, give a very brief sort of rundown in how I've got to where I am now doing all of this. And certainly in regards to the YouTube channel, it was something I thought about doing last year, and I sort of like to challenge myself when I get into something. I like to do as much as I can and get as good as I can at something. And as you all know, with collecting, it's more of a case of space and the finances to do it. So there's huge periods where you're sort of just looking at what other people have got and joining in discussions online with things like that, and watching YouTube channels. And I watched some of the YouTube channels and I was really impressed with what some of the people were doing, and I thought, I'd like to have a go at that. I'd like to see if I can do that. And I'd sort of put it off, and then eventually this year, with the arrival of this fella, that's where I started doing it. So this is why I'm doing this. I want to get better at this. I want to try and get this channel as good as I can get it, but obviously I need your input to help with that. And hopefully it'll be beneficial for all of us, and I'll get better at this as it goes on. So anyway, that's why I'm doing the YouTube channel. I'll constantly be discussing my statues and my collection and what I'd like and what I'd like to do with it. I'm not going to be someone who swaps their statues every 5 minutes. I can't really be doing with that, nor things that I see that isn't me. I'm not knocking the people who do it. We all do what we want to do. I don't like big cluttered collections where there's so much there you can't really see. I always see images that people have done where they have one statue on a really nice plinth, maybe LED lit. That to me looks far more classy, tasteful and effective than a detolf with 30 statues crammed on it. That to me just looks untidy, and I'm a little bit OCD with things like that anyway. So not knocking those that do it. If that's what you like, by all means, but it's not for me. So yeah, so when I was thinking about today and what I was going to chat about, I started thinking about the themes that I'm into and why I collect, and I realised really I've always collected. I've always been a collector, and as a little kid, I can remember I had Lego. I still love Lego, incidentally. I wish I had a bigger house so I could keep buying the UCS Star Wars sets, but I've had a few, but I've had to sell them all for space for all of these things. And yeah, so I can remember in the late 70s with the space Lego coming out, which really sort of coincided with the birth of Star Wars, because I'm old enough to have seen all the original films at the cinema on their original releases. Star Wars was something that I was just enveloped by it, and I've been a lifelong fan of the original trilogies, and I've always loved Star Wars. Unfortunately, I don't love what Disney have done, with the exception of The Mandalorian and Rogue One. Everything else has been, in my mind, atrocious. But yeah, so I can remember I loved the Star Wars Lego, and I can remember that was towards the end of me as a child having the Star Wars Lego. And I also used to have, they were called Play People, it's Playmobil now. And because of the huge influence of watching Westerns as a kid, my dad always used to sit me down and we'd watch the Sunday matinee, which was either Westerns or World War II films. I had a huge, and still do have a huge love for Western films, especially ones from the 1950s and the 1960s. The Man with No Names being the prime example. I was also a huge lover of anything that Ray Harryhausen had his hand on. Those plasticine animated films, Jason and the Argonauts, still a film I watch this day regularly. I love it because it's got my name on it. No. So yeah, Clash of the Titans, which I actually saw at the cinema. My dad took me to see that. My dad took me to see a lot of films actually as a kid. He took me to see the original Star Wars films, Clash of the Titans, Raiders of the Lost Ark, Flash Gordon in 1980. My dad would always take me to see these films, which have stayed with me to this day. So I had this huge love for the fantasy realm and those animated films. The Sinbad films were that's another example. And I just loved the monsters and creatures and the creativity. And another thing my dad did was get me drawing. He used to sit me down and sort of taught me how to draw. So I drew all through my childhood and into my teens. Even at work, I was constantly being asked to draw cartoons for someone or some incident that had happened. Sadly, I don't do it now. The last proper drawing I did is actually the one for the thumbnail for this site. That's my drawing. And yeah, so I loved the creativity and the design and the artwork and the how people were able to visualize this thing that actually didn't exist, and these creatures that didn't exist. That was always a huge attraction to me. And I can remember at the end of the 1970s with the birth of Dungeons and Dragons. And unfortunately, none of my mates would play it. I loved it, and none of my mates would play it, and you couldn't do it on your own. So I was sort of a bit stuck. I can remember I think it was the one Dungeons and Dragons set I had, or book that I had, was called Stormbringer. Where I think the main character was Elric in that. I might be, but no, I say no one would. None of my mates would play it. They were all busy playing football or doing whatever it was they did. So I was chuffed to bits when, I can't remember when it was, I think it was in the very, very early 80s. I was in WH Smith's with my mum and I found this book, and it was called The Forest of Doom. And it was by Steve Jackson and Ian Livingstone, who did a huge series of books actually, fighting fantasy novels, which were for you. You read the book and you made decisions, and it was a brilliant idea that you flipped to different paragraphs in the book, depending on what decisions you made, and there was always challenges and things to work out, and I just loved those books. I loved them. I've still got a load of them upstairs. And yeah, I can remember The Forest of Doom was the first one I had, beautifully illustrated by an artist called Ian McCaig, who went on to illustrate another one of my favourite books in the series, which was City of Thieves. The villains, who you only ever got to fight at the very end, had these fantastic names. Zanzibar Bone, I think, was the villain in City of Thieves, and was it Balthus Dyer? I think that was Citadel of Chaos. And and these artists were just incredible. I can remember another artist that I used to love his artwork was John Blanche, who did all of the Steve Jackson sorcery books. And and I can remember I was just so influenced by these. And then when I eventually read Lord of the Rings, which I'd left school by that point, I read it quite later on in life. I can remember thinking this is the book I always wanted to read. And I've read Lord of the Rings 3 times now, which I know there's people out there have read it multiple times, but I've read it 3 times. And then I saw John Howe's artwork. I've actually got a book upstairs of John Howe's artwork, and yeah, I don't need to go heavily into this. Any of you who've seen that, you know exactly what I'm talking about. So periodically, as a kid, that's where it all stemmed from. I'd always had these collections of, like my Playmobil, I had the Knights and the Western sets and the Pirate sets later on. I had my space Lego, and I used to set it up and look at it, and then I had all this artwork that was coming along that I was being inspired by, and I'd sit and draw and draw and draw for hours. But obviously I had all the Star Wars toys up, but I just used to set them up and look at them. I wouldn't play with them. I never lost a gun. I never lost a Lego brick. So this really is just a natural development on that, really. And I sort of went through my 20s and 30s, and I did all the stuff that we do, drinking and being an idiot, and I got married and divorced. Had a daughter. She's 18 now, and she lives just a mile down the road from me, actually. And she quite likes some of the stuff that I'm into, more than music. But anyway, I can remember I had hobbies. I always had hobbies that I did. I always have to keep myself occupied. I've always got to have a passion in something. And I was never into football or motorbikes or any of that other crap that all the other lads did. And I was always sort of did things that I seemed to do on my own, and thankfully the internet came along and we all got social media, and I was able to meet people who had the same passions as me, which was fantastic. And I've made friends doing the various different things I've done over the years. The only thing is I seem to do something and get really good at it and then stop and start something else. So I'm hoping that isn't the case now, and the fact that I'm now 50, I don't think it will be, because I normally do these things for about 12, 15 years and then change. So yeah, I don't think I'm going to be changing much in my 60s. So yeah, one of the things I used to do, incidentally, was I used to keep and breed tarantulas, and I stopped all that a few years ago, unfortunately, because I developed quite a bad allergic reaction to the hairs on them. So yeah, so it was around about that time where I was selling my tarantulas. I said I was on my own, I lived on my own, and I noticed, I can't remember if it was in the film Paul, at the start after I believe it's the San Diego Comic-Con, where they've got what looks to be a Hot Toys Stormtrooper on the side. Or it could have been Big Bang Theory in the comic shop, because there were a lot of pieces in there which I now recognise as being sideshow pieces. And I can remember thinking to myself, I'd love to have something like that. I'd love to have these models or these statues of really proper, accurate pieces to have, and have a few in the house. And I ended up searching, and I stumbled across the Sideshow website, and that was it. That was the start. And I can remember my very first piece was actually a Sand Trooper. I don't know if it was Sideshow's piece or whether it was the Hot Toys piece. I honestly can't remember. I think it was Sideshow's, actually. But it was the 6-scale posable Sand Trooper. He had the orange shoulder pauldron and the big blaster rifle and the backpack. And he was actually on the mantelpiece there. That's where I put him. And I ended up, I think as a lot of statue collectors do, you tend to start with Funko Pops or Hot Toys 6 scales, and quite a lot of us then progress to statues off the back of that. But I had quite a few Hot Toys, and I can remember I had the Hound from Game of Thrones, RoboCop, I had Brandon Lee the Crow, and Pinhead from Hellraiser. I'm not a massive horror film fan, but I did think Pinhead was one of the best horror villains ever. Way better than that boring Jason and the other one with the masks on. Who gives a shit about them? Anyway, so sorry, I just can't. They just bore the life out of me. So yeah, so I had quite a few. I had Darth Vader and Boba Fett, and yeah, quite a few of these Hot Toy pieces. And I can remember one day I was sat having a brew when I was watching TV, and my RoboCop was over there. And I got imposed in such a way, and I was like, oh, that is so annoying, because I noticed in the, this is going to sound really weird, but in the crotch area, you got that horrible flat-edged, moulded plastic wedge that you get. Like, I can remember I got it on the Star Wars figures because it's the way it has to be. And I was like, oh, that just ruins it. That just ruins it for me, because it does now not look like a real little version of RoboCop. It looks like a moulded plastic toy, which of course it was. Please don't think I sit here looking at the crotch areas of my pieces, but yeah, that's what sort of turned me then to start looking at something that I felt was I don't want to say better, because that, I don't want to offend people that collect hot toys, but just something more mature, shall we say? Yeah, okay, better, mature, whatever. I can't think on the spur of the moment how a better way to describe it, but I wanted absolute accuracy. And I think hot toys collectors are used to getting a little bit of stick anyway, so I'm sure they can all take it on the chin. So I started selling my hot toys off, and I can remember the first statue I had was actually the Sideshow premium format Darth Maul. And I can remember when it arrived, and I put him on the base, and he had the double light up LED lit lights. So I was like, "This is it. This is what I was looking for. This is what I want." So that was the first piece, and I remember I got the Sideshow Darth Vader one, which was the one which was based in Cloud City. And I think at the time Sideshow were previewing the Leia Organa from A New Hope, and also the Bespin Luke. And I'd started looking, I think, wow, I can get like loads of these Star Wars characters, and I wanted to get quarter scales. I wanted to get the full lineup of the bounty hunters in Empire when they stood on the bridge there. And I started going through not just the prices and availability, but also where am I going to put all these things, because these things take up a lot more room. And I got a little bit concerned that Star Wars was a very big area to get into. There was seemingly endless choices and pieces to have. So I sort of pumped the brakes on Star Wars collecting. I don't think I went beyond having Maul and Vader, and I didn't have Vader for very long before I sold him. And somewhere along the line in that hazy era where I was trying to decide what to do and where to go with collecting, I started joining a few Facebook groups as well. No DC, No Marvel is the one I'm on mostly now. I'm on quite a few others, Prime One collectors obviously, and Lord of the Rings collectors are another site I'm on regularly. But if you're not done so, pop over to No DC, No Marvel if you're not into DC or Marvel. Great bunch on there. I've had a lot of help and advice off some of the guys on there that post regularly. And I had somehow picked up the Skeletor, the Sideshow Skeletor piece, which I think was 5th scale. It certainly wasn't quarter scale because it was quite small, but it was very detailed. And I was looking at what I was going to do in regards to having something with him, because he was on the top shelf up there. And purely by accident, I saw that Sideshow had this figure called Death, Master of the Underworld, and I saw it was part of the Court the Deadline. Now at the time I knew nothing about the Court the Deadline, so I looked into that, and to cut a long story short, I fell headfirst in love with the Court the Deadline, and I ended up with, any of you may have watched my first ridiculously titled, because it's a load of letters and numbers, video. I had about 14 premium formats, and I had posters, and I had pins, and I had all manner of memorabilia. The books, I bought all the books from the Court of the Dead, and I have to say, looking back, that I think the best work Sideshow has done is their Court of the Dead. Every piece in their Court of the Dead, I was exemplary, and the reason I got out of that was sort of twofold, really. I personally felt, and I still feel to this day, that the Court of the Dead was running out of steam, sadly. That it felt to me that Sideshow themselves seemed to have lost interest in their own line. And I, very sadly, I haven't seen much in the last 2 years since I sold my collection, anything to change my opinion on that, which is a huge shame, because I loved the Court of the Dead. I've got one very good friend who is a massive, probably the biggest collector of that line. And I hope I'm wrong. But from what I've seen, there's literally been no premium formats now for so long. The last one they revealed was some figure called Strife, who nobody knows anything about. They've got this group of characters called the Conclave of Shadows, who I think every Court of the Dead collector would love to see them made in premium formats. And they've not done it. I think we've had 2 spooktaculars where there's been no court reveal, which is unheard of. They seem to be doing these 6 scale ones now, and they're not even doing them. They're getting other companies to do them. So yeah, I don't want to go too much into that, but that was my reason for leaving, was periodically I felt that it was grinding to a halt. There wasn't enough new material coming out. I've got the new Demethyl book upstairs. I'll still buy the books. I'll still follow the storylines, because Shadows of the Underworld was one of the best graphic novels I've ever read. I loved it. But yeah, that's I felt it was running out of steam. So, and then I saw one day, as I think I'd already started selling a few pieces, but I wasn't quite sure what I was going to do. I saw the preview of his right hand. Do you remember that? It was sometime at the beginning of 2020, maybe the end of 2019. They just showed the hand with the ring light, and I was like, oh my God, yes, that's it. That is it. That's what I want. My favourite book, some of my top favourite series of films, and by my favourite company, because I'd owned one piece by then by Primon, which was actually Lady Maria of the Astral Clock Tower, and I'd never played Bloodborne. I just saw it. I just saw the piece, and it was at the time one of the best pieces I'd ever seen, and I just had to have it, so I bought it. And I had it sat down here on a small plinth. My half-scale Terminator's there now. And I've got to do a review on that soon, even though there's a few out there, but I'm still going to do it. And when I took her out of the box, it was a case of, wow, okay, this is it. This is it. This is a whole other level of statue. The quality, the sculpt, the paint, the detail, it just reeked top end quality. And I thought, yeah, this is what I'm looking for. So that's what drove me to, and I know that they were doing Lord of the Rings, and that brings us up to now. Now I've got Sauron here. I've got the Balrog diorama over there. I've got every single Lord of the Rings piece by Prime One on pre-order. Everything. I've also got a couple of other pieces on pre-order. The Night King from Game of Thrones, my favourite TV series, even though it ended so atrociously. And I've got, what else have I got? Oh, obviously the Third Scale Predator as well. And I'm still looking for an Alien piece. I have got the Alien Warrior on pre-order, but I'm not sure I'm going to go through with that because of space. Because where I was going to pose him, now the Wheat Escape from the Road piece will be going there. So yeah, so that sort of brings us up to now and where I am and why I'm doing this and why I collect what I collect. So I hope that's been interesting for you guys, and it's experience for me to keep doing these. So these chat things will be a regular thing that I'll be doing very different subjects. So if you've got any questions or subjects or things you want to talk about, either comment on the bottom of this video, and I promise I'll get back to each and every one of you, and I will bring it up in the next chat. And I've got a Facebook page, exactly the same name, Hort the Collector. I'll put previews up on there of what's coming up. If you want anything, bring up anything answering, stick a comment on there. Please like and subscribe if you haven't done so already, guys. It mega helps me and the channel. And thank you for listening to me once again, waffle on for however long I've been chatting for now, way too long probably. So I'm going to go now, and I'll catch you on my next video, which will probably be coming out next week, and maybe because I'm working late all this coming week, which sucks. So yeah, thank you very much, and I'll see you all soon. Have a great week.